My name is Demi, 32 years old, and in the eyes of my family, I am a disappointment, simply because at this age, I still haven't found a rich husband. The humiliation reached its peak at my sister's wedding at the Ritz-Carlton. While she was screaming in my face in front of 200 upper-class guests because I dared to stand in the wrong position in the photo, General Sterling, a four-star legend of the U.S. military, walked in. He walked past the bride, ignored my father's handshake, and stopped right in front of me, the estranged child wearing a baggy, discounted bridesmaid dress. To the horror of the entire room, the general raised his hand to salute me with the most formal military protocol. Lieutenant Colonel Morris, the 7th Fleet is awaiting your orders. In that moment, the wine glass in my mother's hand fell to the floor, shattering into pieces. That was the moment they realized. The daughter they despised for the past 20 years was the very person holding the secrets protecting the sleep of this entire country. Comment strength and subscribe to the channel right now, if you believe that. A person's value does not lie in the clothes they wear, but in the battles they silently win. The air inside the Ritz-Carlton ballroom was thick enough to choke on. It didn't smell like a celebration. It smelled like $50,000 worth of imported peonies and the sharp, metallic tang of judgment. Everywhere I looked, there was an aggressive display of wealth. The crystal chandeliers overhead were so bright they made my eyes ache, reflecting off the diamond jewelry of the guests like interrogating spotlights. Waiters in white gloves moved like ghosts through the crowd, balancing trays of Cristal champagne, terrified of making a sound that might disturb the curated perfection of the evening. And then there was me. I stood near a pillar wrapped in white satin, trying to make myself as small as possible. I felt like a stain on a pristine white tablecloth. My sister, Chloe, had insisted I wear this dress. It wasn't the same silk chiffon the other bridesmaids wore. No, mine was a polyester blend in a shade she called Dusty Rose. Though on me, it looked more like expired ham. It was 2 sizes too big, bunching at the waist and sagging at the shoulders, a deliberate choice to ensure I didn't accidentally pull focus for even a second. I was just checking the time on my wrist, a reflex really, checking for alerts that I knew were coming, when I felt the claw. It was a sharp, sudden pain digging into my upper arm. I didn't have to turn around to know who it was. The scent of Chanel No. 5 applied too heavily hit me a split second before the voice did. "What do you think you are doing?" Chloe hissed the words, her voice low but vibrating with a rage that threatened to crack her heavy makeup. She looked manic. Her Vera Wang gown was stunning, a masterpiece of lace and tulle, but her face was twisted into a snarl that belonged on a predator. "I'm just standing here, Chloe," I said quietly, keeping my voice even. "I'm staying out of the way, just like you asked." "Out of the way." Her grip on my arm tightened, her manicured nails digging into my skin through the cheap fabric of my dress. She jerked her head toward the center of the room. "You are hovering right behind the VIP section, Demi. The photographer from Vogue is setting up a wide shot of the cake cutting, and you are lurking in the background like a gremlin. You are ruining my aesthetic." She said the word aesthetic like it was a religious doctrine I had just blasphemed. "I didn't realize the frame went this wide," I tried to explain, but my throat felt tight. Around us, heads were starting to turn. The murmurs began. I saw Mrs. van der Hoven, one of my mother's bridge club friends, cover her mouth with a cocktail napkin, whispering something to her husband. His eyes raked over my baggy dress with a look of pure pity. "You never realize anything, do you?" Chloe's voice rose an octave, abandoning the whisper. She didn't care who heard anymore. "Look at you. You look like you slept in that dress. God, why couldn't you just fix your hair? Why do you have to be so... you?" I looked past Chloe, searching for an ally. Any ally. My eyes found my mother, Janet. She was standing just 5 feet away, clutching her champagne flute. She saw exactly what was happening. She saw her 35-year-old daughter physically hurting her younger sister. But Mom didn't step forward. She didn't say, "Chloe, that's enough." Instead, she nervously adjusted the triple-strand pearls at her throat, her nervous tick, and gave me a look that I knew by heart. It was a look of exhausted disappointment. "Demi," Mom whispered, leaning in but not getting too close, as if my failure was contagious. Please, don't upset your sister on her big day. Just go stand over by the band equipment, in the shadows. You're distracting people. The betrayal hit me harder than Chloe's nails. It was a physical blow to the chest. Go stand in the shadows. That had been the instruction for my entire life. Be quiet. Be invisible. Don't let anyone know the Morris family produced a reject who works in IT instead of marrying a hedge fund manager. I felt the heat rising in my cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from a deep, simmering injustice that I had swallowed for decades. I'm leaving the area, Chloe. Let go of my arm, I said, my voice hardening just a fraction. I'm not done with you, Chloe shrieked. She was fully committed to the scene now. She released my arm only to jab her index finger toward the double doors at the far end of the ballroom. Get out. Actually, just get out of the ballroom entirely until the photos are done. You're bad luck. You're a visual disaster. She took a step toward me, her finger inches from my nose, her chest heaving with the exertion of her tantrum. The entire room had gone quiet. The band had stopped playing. 200 pairs of eyes were fixed on us. The beautiful, perfect bride banishing the ugly duckling sister. The humiliation was absolute. It burned my skin. I could feel the tears pricking the corners of my eyes, not from sadness, but from the sheer, crushing weight of their cruelty. Chloe opened her mouth to scream one final insult, to banish me for good. Boom! The sound wasn't an explosion, but it might as well have been. The heavy 12-foot mahogany doors to the main entrance were thrown open with such force that they bounced against the stoppers. The sound echoed like a gunshot through the silent ballroom. Chloe froze. Her finger was still pointed at my face, her mouth still open in a half-formed scream. The air in the room shifted instantly. The scent of peonies and perfume was suddenly cut by a different energy. Something cold, sharp, and undeniably powerful. A phalanx of men in dress blues marched in. The rhythm of their footsteps on the marble floor was perfectly synchronized, a heavy percussive beat that silenced even the breathing of the guests. And at the center of the formation walked a man with silver hair and 4 silver stars gleaming on his shoulders. I didn't look at General Sterling. I couldn't. Instead, I kept my eyes locked on my sister's face. I watched as the rage in her eyes flickered, stalled, and was slowly, deliciously replaced by the one thing she had never felt when looking at me: fear. That look of terror in my sister's eyes as the general marched toward us. It was something I had never seen before. It was satisfying, yes, but it was also jarring. Because just 48 hours ago, the only thing Chloe and my parents had for me was a cold, practiced indifference. To understand why that salute meant so much, you have to understand the silence that came before it. You have to understand Tuesday. I had just touched down at Dulles International Airport after a 20-hour itinerary originating from Okinawa. My body didn't know what time zone it was in. My joints ached from being crammed into a jump seat on a transport plane for the first leg, and then economy class commercial for the second. I wasn't wearing a uniform. I was wearing a pair of faded Levi's, a gray t-shirt that had seen better days, and I was carrying a coyote brown tactical backpack that was fraying at the straps. I stood at the curb of the arrivals terminal, watching families hug and business partners shake hands. No one was there for me. I didn't expect a parade, but a familiar face would have been nice. Instead, I pulled out my phone and summoned an Uber. The ride out to Loudoun County took 45 minutes. For those who don't know, Loudoun is one of the wealthiest counties in America. It's a place where the driveways are long, the lawns are manicured by armies of landscapers, and the houses look less like homes and more like monuments to insecurity. When the Toyota Camry pulled up to my parents' driveway, a winding path of crushed stone leading to a 6-bedroom colonial mansion, I felt that familiar knot tighten in my stomach. It wasn't hunger, it was dread. I hauled my pack out of the trunk and walked to the front door. I didn't even have to knock. My mother, Janet, opened it before I reached the mat. She was already dressed for dinner, wearing a silk blouse and holding a glass of Chardonnay. She didn't hug me. She didn't ask, "Demi, are you okay? How was the flight?" She looked past me, scanning the driveway, her eyes narrowing as the Uber driver pulled away. "Please tell me the neighbors didn't see you get out of that thing," she said, her voice tight. She stepped back to let me in, not to welcome me, but to get me out of public view. "I told you to book a town car, Demi, or a limo. You are the sister of the bride, arriving in a taxi. It looks cheap. It makes us look like we're struggling." "It's good to see you too, Mom," I said, my voice raspy from dehydration. I dropped my heavy pack on the marble floor of the foyer with a dull thud. "Don't scratch the floor," she snapped, flinching. "And look at you. You look like you've been sleeping in a ditch. Go upstairs and shower before your father gets home. And for God's sake, put on something that doesn't look like it came from a donation bin." I walked up the grand staircase, the same one I used to slide down as a kid, feeling like a stranger in a museum. Dinner that night was a masterclass in isolation. We sat in the formal dining room, the table set with enough silverware to perform surgery. My father, Robert, sat at the head of the table. He was a man who measured his self-worth by the closing bell of the New York Stock Exchange. He spent the first 20 minutes monologuing about his portfolio, ignoring the fact that his youngest daughter hadn't been home in 2 years. "Tech stocks are volatile, but the dividends on the energy sector are holding," he said, cutting his medium-rare steak with precision. He finally glanced at me, his eyes glossing over my presence as if I were a piece of furniture. "So, Demetria, still playing with computers?" I opened my mouth to speak. I wanted to tell him that I wasn't playing. I wanted to tell him that 3 days ago, I had been the lead intelligence officer coordinating a cyber defense grid for the entire 7th Fleet. I wanted to tell him that the computers I worked with held the safety of every sailor in the Pacific Theater in their circuits. But before I could get a word out, Chloe chimed in. "Oh, Dad, don't ask her about work. It's boring," Chloe said. She waved her fork dismissively, a diamond bracelet jingling on her wrist. "She does IT support, like the Geek Squad at Best Buy. She fixes printers, installs antivirus software, resets passwords for old people who forget them. That sort of thing." She took a sip of her wine and smirked at me. "Right, Demi? Did you try turning it off and on again?" The insult hung in the air over the roast potatoes. I looked at my sister. I looked at my father, who nodded absently, accepting her explanation because it fit his narrative. In their world, I was the screw-up, the failure, the one who couldn't cut it in the corporate world, so I ran away to the Navy to fix routers. I gripped my steak knife a little tighter. The clearance level required to enter my office was higher than the net worth of everyone at this table combined. But I said nothing. I learned a long time ago that you cannot explain your value to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Stoicism is a soldier's best defense. "Something like that," I said quietly, and put a piece of steak in my mouth. It tasted like cardboard. Later that night, I went down to the kitchen to get a glass of water. The house was dark, but the kitchen was illuminated by the under-cabinet lighting that cost more than my first car. Chloe was there. She was leaning against the granite island, scrolling through her phone, looking at wedding RSVP lists. When she saw me, she put the phone down. Her face lost the playful mockery from dinner and hardened into something colder. "I need to make something very clear to you," she said. No preamble. "What is it, Chloe?" I leaned against the fridge, exhausted. "General Sterling is coming on Saturday," she said. The name dropped like a heavy stone. "He is the superior officer of Mark's father. He's a 4-star general. He's a very big deal." "I know who General Sterling is," I said. Chloe pushed off the counter and walked toward me, invading my personal space. "Good. Then you know he doesn't have time for low-level grunts like you. Mark says you're just a glorified secretary in uniform. So, here is the rule. You do not speak to General Sterling. You do not approach him. You do not try to network with him or ask him for a job recommendation." She poked a finger into my shoulder, the same spot she would grab 2 days later at the Ritz. "My wedding is about excellence, Demi. It is about success. I don't need your situation rubbing off on me. I don't need you embarrassing me by letting everyone know my sister is a 32-year-old failure who fixes laptops for a living. Do you understand?" I looked at her. I looked at this woman who shared my DNA but knew absolutely nothing about my soul. I thought about the classified briefing I had prepared for General Sterling just last week, a briefing he had personally commended via encrypted cable. I understand, Chloe, I said. I won't say a word to him. I know so many of you listening right now have been in this exact spot. You work hard, you sacrifice, you achieve things in silence, only to have your own family treat you like you're invisible or incompetent. It is a lonely, heavy feeling. If you have ever had your achievements dismissed by the people who are supposed to be proud of you, I want you to hit that like button right now. And please leave a comment below with just one word: respect. Let's show everyone in this community that we see their value, even if their families don't. I walked back upstairs to my childhood bedroom, the warning echoing in my ears. She thought I was the embarrassment. She had no idea that in 48 hours, the man she was so desperate to impress would be the one to shatter her entire world. That night in my childhood bedroom, lying on a mattress that felt too soft after years of sleeping on military-grade cots, I stared at the ceiling and asked myself the question I knew every single one of you is screaming at your screen right now. Why do you stay? Why did I come back? Why did I take the Uber? Why did I stand there in the kitchen and let my sister poke her finger into my chest and treat me like a servant? I'm a decorated officer. I command respect from men twice my age. I have stared down threats that would make Chloe faint. So why do I crumble the moment I walk through the front door of this house? The answer isn't logical. It's emotional. It's a wound that started bleeding 20 years ago, and I keep coming back, hoping that maybe, just this once, they'll finally hand me a bandage instead of a knife. It started when I was 10 years old. It was Chloe's 13th birthday. Her entry into womanhood, my mother called it. To celebrate, my parents took us to Disney World in Florida. We stayed at the Grand Floridian, the white Victorian-style resort that costs more per night than most people make in a month. For Chloe, it was a coronation. My parents booked her the Bibbidi Bobbidi Boutique package. I watched from the waiting area as 3 staff members fussed over her, putting her hair in an intricate bun, dusting her with glitter, and dressing her in a Cinderella gown that cost $600. She looked beautiful. She looked like the princess my parents always wanted. When it was all over, my father handed me a plastic bag from the gift shop. Inside wasn't a costume or a ticket to a special event. It was a paperback book, a heavy, boring history of the park. Here, my father said, not even looking at me as he adjusted his camera to take photos of Chloe twirling. Read this while we wait in lines. Maybe if you study hard, you can learn to be as successful as your sister is going to be. As successful as your sister. At 10 years old, I learned my place. Chloe was the star. I was the audience. Chloe was the artwork. I was the frame. But the real knife twist, the one that still wakes me up at night, happened when I was 18. Chloe had decided she wanted to be an artist. She applied to a prestigious private art school in New York City. The tuition was astronomical. $50,000 a semester, plus housing in Manhattan, plus supplies. My parents didn't blink. They wrote the check with a flourish. Our Chloe is so creative, my mother bragged to her friends. You can't put a price on talent. Chloe dropped out after 3 semesters because the 8 non-AM classes stifled her spirit. That was $200,000 of my father's money. Gone. Poof. And they laughed about it. They called it her exploratory phase. A year later, I was accepted into a rigorous pre-commissioning program that would lead to the Naval Academy. I needed a co-signer for the initial student loans to cover the prep school year before my full scholarship kicked in. It was a fraction of what they had spent on Chloe's failed art degree. I sat them down at the kitchen table with the paperwork. I had a spreadsheet. I had a repayment plan. My father pushed the papers back across the table like they were contaminated. I'm not signing this, Demetria, he said, his voice cold. But Dad, I pleaded, it's for my career. It's for the Navy. I'll pay you back every cent. My mother chimed in, swirling her iced tea. It's not about the money, sweetie. It's about your prospects. Look, you're already a plain girl. If you go into the military, you'll become hard. You'll be masculine. Who is going to want to marry a woman who wears combat boots? We're doing this for your own good. We want you to find a husband, not a war. They refused to sign. They cut me off. I had to work 3 jobs, waitressing at a diner, stocking shelves at a grocery store, and tutoring math, just to scrape together the funds to start my life. I cried for weeks. I felt like I was defective. I felt like I was trash. There was only one person who ever saw me. My grandmother, Nana Rose. She passed away 4 years ago, and I miss her every single day. I remember sitting on her back porch during a humid Virginia summer, crying into her apron after Mom had made a comment about my weight. Nana smelled like lavender and old paper. She stroked my hair, her hands rough and warm. "Stop crying, little bird," she said softly. "Listen to me. Your sister. She's a rose. Your parents love roses. They are bright, they are colorful, and everyone stops to look at them." "I want to be a rose," I sobbed. "No," Nana said firmly, lifting my chin. "Roses are weak, Demi. The first frost comes, and they die. If you don't water them for a day, they wilt. You are not a rose. You are an oak tree." She pointed to the massive gnarled oak in the backyard. "That tree has been struck by lightning. It has frozen in ice storms. It has survived droughts, and it is still standing. It holds up the sky. Flowers fade, Demi, but the oak tree endures. You are going to endure." That conversation saved my life. It was the reason I joined the Navy. I didn't just join to serve my country. I joined because I needed to find a family that didn't care about my waistline or my marriage prospects. I wanted a world where rank was earned, not bought. I wanted a world where, if you did the work, you got the respect. In the Navy, the ocean doesn't care if your dad is rich. The enemy doesn't care if you're wearing designer clothes. All that matters is competence. All that matters is if you can hold the line when the storm comes. I found that family. I found brothers and sisters who would take a bullet for me. I became a lieutenant colonel. I became valuable. But standing in that house, surrounded by the ghosts of my childhood, I realized a painful truth. You can win every medal in the world, but you can never win the war for your parents' love if they have already decided you are the loser. I closed my eyes, letting a single tear slide into my ear, and whispered the verse Nana used to read to me. It was Psalm 118, verse 22. "The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone." I repeated it like a mantra. I am the cornerstone. I am the cornerstone. I was drifting into a restless sleep, clinging to that verse, when the sound pulled me back to reality. It wasn't the gentle rustle of leaves or Nana's voice. Hiss! It was the aggressive spitting sound of a cheap steam iron firing a jet of hot vapor. The sound of my reality checking back in. Hiss! My eyes snapped open. The morning sun was bleeding through the curtains. It was Saturday, the wedding day. And the oak tree was about to be turned back into the maid. 0500 hours. My internal clock didn't care that I was on leave. It didn't care that I was sleeping in a guest room decorated with enough floral chintz to induce a migraine. My eyes snapped open at 5 a.m. sharp, my pulse steady, my mind instantly clearing the fog of sleep. In the Navy, 0500 is the start of the operational day. In the Morris household, it was an ungodly hour where only the help was awake. I rolled out of bed, grabbing the black rectangular device from the nightstand. It wasn't my personal iPhone. It was a secure government-issued communicator with military-grade encryption capable of connecting directly to the Pacific Command Network via satellite. I padded into the ensuite bathroom and locked the door. Then, I turned the shower handle all the way to the right. The water hammered against the tiles, creating a wall of white noise, a simple but effective counter-surveillance measure I had learned a decade ago. Steam began to fill the small room, fogging up the mirror. Sitting on the closed toilet lid, I entered a 20-character alphanumeric password. The screen glowed green. Sitrep, Pacific Theater. 0900 local time. While my family slept, dreaming of wedding cakes and seating charts, I was reading intelligence reports about a developing situation in the South China Sea. A foreign frigate was harassing a supply convoy. The tension was escalating. My team in Okinawa needed authorization to reposition a surveillance asset to get a better look. Authorize movement, I typed, my thumbs moving in a blur. Keep the signature low. I want eyes on them, not a fight. I spent the next 2 hours in that bathroom, running the world from a toilet seat. I was Lieutenant Colonel Morris, the woman who knew where the nuclear submarines were hiding. I was the woman whose analysis landed on the president's desk. Then, at 0700, the doorknob jiggled. I killed the screen instantly, shoved the device under a stack of towels, and unlocked the door just as a fist pounded on it from the other side. Demi, I know you're in there. I can hear the water running. I opened the door. The steam billowed out, hitting my sister in the face. Chloe was standing there in a silk bridal robe that said Bride in Rhinestones across the chest. Her hair was in curlers, and she was holding a massive armful of fabric that looked like a fabric store had exploded. She didn't say good morning. She pushed past me into the room and dumped the pile onto my unmade bed. Finally, she huffed, fanning the steam away from her face. God, it's like a sauna in here. What were you doing? Boiling yourself? Just waking up, Chloe, I said, leaning against the doorframe. Well, good. Since you're up, you can make yourself useful. She gestured to the pile on the bed. It was a mountain of table runners, napkins, and 3 bridesmaid robes that had gotten wrinkled in transit. The steamer the hotel provided is garbage. It's spitting water everywhere. Mom said you brought your own iron? The heavy-duty one. I did, I said. I always traveled with my own iron. Uniforms had to be crisp. Great, Chloe clapped her hands, a sound that grated on my nerves. I need all of this pressed. Perfectly flat, no creases. The photographer is coming at 10 for the getting ready shots, and I cannot have wrinkled linen in the background. It looks trashy. She turned to leave, then paused, looking me up and down. I was wearing my PT shorts and a navy t-shirt. And be careful, she added, her voice dripping with condescension. That silk is expensive. Don't burn it. You're good at these menial tasks. You know, working with your hands, so just try not to mess it up, okay? Leave the thinking to the wedding planner. She slammed the door. I stood there for a moment, listening to the silence return. Menial tasks. I walked over to the closet, pulled out the ironing board, and set it up. I plugged in the iron. For the next hour, I existed in 2 parallel universes. It was the most absurd, ironic hour of my life. In my left hand, I held the iron, pressing it carefully against a cheap, polyester blend robe that belonged to one of Chloe's sorority sisters. Hiss. The steam rose up, smoothing out a stubborn wrinkle near the hem. In my right hand, I held the secure device. Ping. A message from the con of the USS Virginia, a nuclear-powered fast-attack submarine. They were requesting confirmation on a vector change to avoid a thermal layer that might give away their position. Confirm vector change, I typed with one thumb, while my other hand rotated the iron to get around a button. Maintain depth at 400 feet. Silent running. I looked at the scene. Here I was, ensuring that a $2 billion warship, carrying a crew of 130 sailors and enough firepower to level a city, moved silently through the deep ocean. And at the exact same time, I was ensuring that a $20 robe from Amazon didn't have a crease in it, so my sister's Instagram photo would look aesthetic. I smoothed the fabric. Hiss! I authorized the deployment of a sonar buoy. Tap! Don't burn the silk, I whispered to myself, mimicking Chloe's voice. Then I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Don't start World War III. The stakes were hilariously mismatched. If I burned the robe, Chloe would scream at me for an hour. If I messed up the coordinates for the sub, people would die. International treaties would be violated. But to my family, the robe was the crisis. The robe was the reality. The submarine was just computer stuff that Demi did because she couldn't get a real job. I finished the last napkin, folding it into a perfect square, military precision applied to a wedding breakfast. I set the iron down and checked my device one last time before I had to go downstairs and play the role of the dutiful, invisible sister. A new message popped up. It wasn't an operational update. It was a personal text from Master Chief Henderson, my second in command back in Okinawa. Ma'am, heard the bird is in the air. Situation in the South China Sea is stabilizing thanks to your call on the Vector. We've got the watch. Enjoy the wedding. Hope they know they've got a heavy hitter in the room. Don't let the civilians drive you crazy. I stared at the screen. A lump formed in my throat. Hope they know. They don't, Chief, I whispered to the empty room. They really don't. I powered down the device and locked it in my safe. I walked over to the full-length mirror on the closet door. I looked at my reflection. My hair was pulled back in a severe ponytail. My face was scrubbed clean of makeup. I looked tired. I picked up the floral apron Chloe had left for me, the one she wanted all the bridesmaids to wear so we wouldn't stain our dresses while we served her mimosa. I tied the apron strings around my waist. The lieutenant colonel vanished. The IT support girl appeared. I looked at myself one last time, a woman who commands fleets, now dressed up like a 1950s housewife to serve champagne to people who wouldn't trust me to walk their dogs. Aye, Captain, I said to the mirror, my voice flat. I picked up the stack of perfectly pressed napkins. They were heavy, but not as heavy as the secrets I was carrying. I opened the door and stepped out into the hallway, heading toward the sound of laughter and popping corks, ready to be invisible again. But as I walked, I noticed something. The napkins on top of the pile. They weren't the dusty rose color Chloe had demanded. Under the hallway light, they looked undeniably, unmistakably, blush pink. I smiled. A storm was coming, and for once, I didn't have to authorize it. I walked into the bridal suite holding the stack of pressed napkins like they were radioactive isotopes. I knew exactly what was about to happen. In the military, we call this walking into the kill zone. Here they are, I said, placing the stack on the velvet ottoman. Pressed and ready. Chloe spun around from the mirror. She picked up the top napkin. She held it up to the light. Then, she held it next to the bridesmaid dress. For 3 seconds, there was silence. Absolute, vacuum-sealed silence. Then came the scream. It wasn't a scream of pain. It was a scream of existential horror, the kind of sound a person makes when they witness a murder. Chloe dropped the napkin as if it were covered in anthrax. She collapsed, literally collapsed, onto the chaise lounge, burying her face in her hands. No! 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 She wailed, kicking her feet like a toddler. It's wrong! It's all wrong! My mother rushed over, nearly tripping over her own heels. Chloe! Sweetie, what is it? What happened? Look at it, Mom. Chloe pointed a trembling finger at the linen square on the floor. It's not dusty rose. That is blush. It's blush pink. It has yellow undertones. The dresses have blue undertones. If we put that on the table, the entire reception is going to look like a baby shower. It clashes. It ruins everything. Oh my God, my mother gasped, pressing a hand to her chest. She looked at the napkin with genuine terror. You're right. It's completely off palette. It's a disaster. My father, who had been checking his BlackBerry in the corner, stepped forward, his face red. I paid $5,000 for those linens. I'm going to sue them. I'm calling my lawyer right now. This is breach of contract. This is emotional distress. Dad, fix it, Chloe sobbed, hyperventilating. Get a helicopter, fly in new ones from New York. I can't get married with blush napkins. I'll be a laughingstock. I stood there, wearing my floral apron, watching 3 grown adults have a collective nervous breakdown over a shade of pink that was maybe 2 degrees different from the other shade of pink. It was grotesque. It was a level of privilege so toxic it made the air in the room feel thin. It's just a napkin, Chloe, I said. I couldn't help it. The words just slipped out. The room froze. Chloe lifted her tear-streaked face. My mother glared at me. But before they could shred me, Mark, the groom, stepped in. He walked over to me, placed a hand on my shoulder, and guided me firmly toward the corner of the room, away from the hysteria. Mark was a nice guy. He was a vice president at his father's logistics firm. He wore boat shoes and had a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He thought he was the peacemaker. Demi, he said, his voice low and condescendingly gentle. Look, I know this is hard for you. I frowned. What is? This, He gestured to the room, to the wedding dresses, the chaos, the abundance. Seeing Chloe like this, seeing her have her moment, I know you guys have different paths. Chloe told me about your situation. My situation? I repeated, my voice flat. You know, he lowered his voice to a whisper. The financial struggles, the loneliness. Being single at your age while your younger sister is marrying into, well, this. It's natural to feel jealous, Demi. It's natural to want to sabotage things a little bit because you're hurting. I stared at him. I actually stopped breathing for a second. He thought I ordered the wrong napkins on purpose. He thought I was jealous. I looked at this man who had never ironed his own shirt, who had never faced anything scarier than a dip in the stock market. I had the nuclear launch codes for the Atlantic Theater memorized in a sequence stored in my brain. I had directed drone strikes on terrorist cells while eating an MRE in a dirt bunker. Mark, I said, I didn't order the napkins, and I'm not jealous. He squeezed my shoulder, a patronizing grip. It's okay to admit it. Just try to be the bigger person today, okay? Stay in the background. Don't cause any more drama. Let Chloe shine. We can help you out with some cash after the wedding if you need to pay rent. Just ask. The rage flared in my chest, hot and white. I opened my mouth to tell him exactly where he could shove his cash. I was about to tell him that my base salary plus hazard pay was probably more than what he made pushing papers at his daddy's company. BZZ. BZZT. BZZT. The vibration against my ribs was violent. It wasn't a text. It wasn't a normal call. It was the dead man's switch pattern. 3 long bursts. Code red. Immediate action required. The anger vanished instantly, replaced by cold, hard training. The napkin crisis didn't matter. Mark didn't matter. I pulled the secure black phone out of my apron pocket. The screen was flashing red. Commander Paxiafel T. Priority 1. I have to take this, I said, stepping back from Mark. Demi, Chloe shrieked from the chaise lounge. Put that away. We are in a crisis. Who is calling you right now? It's important, I said, thumbing the biometric scanner to unlock the line. My mother let out a loud, dramatic sigh. Oh, for heaven's sake, it's probably those bill collectors again, or a spam call. She's probably late on her car payment. Demi, turn it off. It's embarrassing. You look like a drug dealer with that burner phone. Let her go, Janet, Mark said, shaking his head with a pitying smile. She probably has to explain to her landlord why the rent is late. Let her handle her mess outside. Hello? This is Morris. Go ahead, I said into the receiver, my voice dropping an octave into my command tone as I turned my back on them. Colonel, we have a situation with the satellite uplink in Sector 4. We need your authentication code to bypass the jamming signal. We have 10 minutes before we lose eyes on the target. Authentication Alpha Zulu 9er7. Reroute through the secondary grid. Do not lose that signal, Lieutenant, I ordered, walking briskly toward the door. Behind me, I heard my father yelling at someone on the phone about suing a linen company for emotional damages. I heard Chloe sobbing about how her life was over because of yellow undertones. I heard Mark apologizing to the room for his troubled sister-in-law. I walked out into the hallway, away from the scent of expensive perfume and stupidity. I looked back one last time through the open door. They were falling apart over a piece of pink fabric. They were screaming, crying, and threatening lawsuits over a napkin. Meanwhile, on the other end of the phone pressed to my ear, 20-year-old sailors were scrambling to keep a surveillance satellite online to prevent a foreign adversary from encroaching on Allied waters. Real people were risking real lives. The contrast was so sharp it made me dizzy. To them, a napkin was a tragedy. To me, a tragedy was a flag draped over a coffin. I'm still here, I said into the phone, walking toward the elevators. I'm clearing the line, reroute initiated, and Lieutenant, tell the boys to stay safe. I hung up. I stood alone in the gilded hallway of the Ritz-Carlton. I took a deep breath. Just a few more hours, I whispered. Just survive the circus. But as I turned the corner toward the main lobby, thinking I had escaped, I saw the elevators open. General Sterling was stepping out, and standing right in his path, armed with a tray of dirty champagne flutes and a fresh load of venom, was my sister. The transition from the bridal suite to the grand foyer was like stepping from a war zone into a museum. The screaming had stopped. The tears had been blotted away with expensive powder. The napkin crisis had been resolved, or at least suppressed under a layer of denial and Pinot Grigio. I stood by a marble pillar, back in my ill-fitting dusty rose dress, watching the cocktail hour unfold. It was a masterclass in American suburban theater. The room was buzzing with the polite, hollow laughter of 200 people who were more interested in the open bar than the couple. A jazz quartet played a soft, inoffensive rendition of Fly Me to the Moon in the corner. Waiters circulated with silver platters of bacon-wrapped scallops and mini crab cakes. And there, in the center of it all, was the gravitational pull of the entire evening, General Marcus Sterling. He was impossible to miss. While the other men in the room wore tuxedos that strained at the waist or trendy slim-fit suits that looked too tight, General Sterling wore his dress blues. The uniform was immaculate. The 4 silver stars on his shoulders caught the light of the chandeliers. The ribbons on his chest told a story of 40 years of combat, sacrifice, and command. He looked like a lion standing in a room full of house cats, and my sister was hanging off his arm like a parasite. Chloe had transformed. The shrieking banshee from the hotel room was gone. In her place was the glowing, gracious bride. She was parading the general around the room, introducing him to her friends' parents, to Mark's business partners, using him as a prop to elevate her own status. "Oh, have you met the general?" I heard her trill, her voice fake and airy. "He's practically family. Mark's father and he go way back." I watched the general's face. He was polite. He was always polite, but his eyes were cold. He wasn't listening to Chloe. He wasn't looking at the guests. He was scanning the room. He checked his wristwatch. A heavy tactical Garmin, not a Rolex. He checked it again. Then he tapped his pocket, where I knew he kept his secure comms device. He was waiting. My heart hammered against my ribs. He had received my code-red reroute confirmation from the bathroom. He knew the situation in the Pacific was fluid. He needed the full debrief. He needed to know if we were looking at a diplomatic incident or a kinetic engagement. He wasn't looking for a bride. He was looking for his intelligence officer. I took a breath. This wasn't about the wedding anymore. This was duty. I stepped away from the pillar. I began to cut through the crowd, moving with purpose. I dodged a waiter with a tray of martinis. I sidestepped a group of women complimenting each other's Botox. I had a clear line of sight to the general. I was 10 feet away. He turned his head. Our eyes met. Recognition flashed in his gaze. He took a step toward me, relief washing over his stern features. He was about to speak. I opened my mouth to say, "Sir, situation report." But I never got the words out. A hand clamped onto my bicep with the force of a hydraulic press. I was yanked sideways, stumbled, and nearly collided with a busboy clearing a table. It was Chloe. She had moved with the speed of a heat-seeking missile the moment she saw me approach. She didn't look at me. She kept her back to the room, smiling at the guests over her shoulder while she cornered me against a service station. "I see what you are doing," she hissed through her teeth, her smile never wavering for the crowd. "I see you stalking him." "Chloe, let go," I said, my voice low. "I need to speak to him. It's important." "Important?" She let out a sharp, cruel laugh. "You think your little desperation play is important? You think I'm going to let you go over there and beg him for a job on my wedding day? You think I'm going to let you humiliate me by telling him you fix computers for a living?" "It's not about a job," I tried to explain, but she wasn't listening. She reached out and grabbed a tray from the busboy next to us. The kid looked terrified and let go immediately. The tray was heavy, piled high with dirty, half-empty champagne flutes, crumpled napkins, the reject blush pink ones, and used toothpicks. The smell of stale alcohol and saliva hit me. Chloe shoved the heavy, dirty tray into my hands. "You want to be involved," she snarled. "Here, make yourself useful. Take this trash to the kitchen and stay there until dinner is served. If I see you near the general again, I will have security throw you out." I stood there, stunned. The cold metal of the tray dug into my palms. The liquid from a tipped-over glass sloshed onto my wrist. "Chloe!" I warned, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. Do not do this. Do it, she snapped. Then my mother appeared. She drifted out of the crowd, smelling of expensive perfume and apathy. She saw me standing there, holding the tray of garbage, being berated by the bride. She didn't defend me. She didn't tell Chloe to stop. She looked at the tray, then looked at me and nodded. Listen to your sister, Demi, Mom said, adjusting her diamond earrings. Honestly, it's better this way. At least this way, you're doing something productive. At least pretend to be useful to society for once instead of just taking up space. At least pretend to be useful to society. The words hit me like a physical slap. I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who I had sent half my paycheck to when Dad's investments took a hit in 2008, anonymously, so his ego wouldn't be bruised. I looked at the sister whose freedom to be a spoiled brat was guaranteed by the fleet I helped protect. I gripped the tray. My knuckles turned white. My fingernails dug into the metal so hard I thought they might snap. The rage that rose up in me wasn't hot anymore. It was cold. It was absolute. It was the kind of calm, deadly focus that comes right before you pull the trigger. I know there are people listening to this right now who have felt this specific kind of burn. The burn of being treated like a servant in your own home. The burn of having your worth reduced to what you can do for someone else, rather than who you are. If you have ever been disrespected by family while you were doing your best to hold it together, I want you to hit that like button. Show me I'm not alone in this. And comment, "Not your maid," below. Let's make that our battle cry today. I looked at the dirty glasses rattling on the tray. I looked at General Sterling, who was now checking his phone with visible agitation, unaware that his best analyst was being ordered to wash dishes 10 feet away. Fine, I whispered. I didn't turn toward the kitchen. I didn't turn toward the exit. I stood my ground. The tray was heavy, but my resolve was heavier. They wanted me to be a servant. Fine. But they had forgotten one thing about servants. Servants are the ones with access to all the rooms, and servants are the ones who know where all the bodies are buried. I took a deep breath, the scent of stale champagne filling my nose, and prepared to drop the bomb. But before I could make a move, before I could throw the tray or walk away, I felt a vibration on my wrist. 2 sharp pulses. I glanced down at my smartwatch. The screen was black, with red text scrolling across it. Target confirmed. Eagle is looking for the nest. It was the signal. And this time, no amount of dirty dishes was going to stop me. Major David Vance, the general's senior aide-de-camp, was a man who prided himself on his situational awareness. He stood near the entrance of the ballroom, his back against a pillar, scanning the crowd not for threats, but for logistics. He was bored. He was watching rich civilians play dress-up. Then his eyes caught movement near the service station. He squinted. He saw a woman in an ill-fitting pink dress holding a tray of dirty dishes. She looked exhausted. She looked defeated. But there was something about her profile, the sharp jawline, the way she held her head despite the slump of her shoulders, that triggered a memory file in his brain. He blinked. He looked closer. No way, he whispered to himself. He knew that face. He had seen that face on a secure video conference 2 weeks ago, briefing the Joint Chiefs of Staff on Chinese naval expansion. That was Lieutenant Colonel Demetria Morris, one of the sharpest intelligence minds in the Pacific Command. A woman who, rumor had it, slept 3 hours a night and ate data for breakfast. And she was buzzing tables. Vance watched as a bride in a massive white dress shouted something at the colonel. He watched as the colonel stood there, taking it, her hands gripping the dirty tray. It was like seeing a lion being whipped by a circus clown. It made no sense. It was surreal. He watched General Sterling check his watch again, looking agitated. Vance knew the general was waiting for the Eagle signal. He reached into his pocket to check the status of the secure line. 10 feet away, the vibration on my wrist was still pulsing. Buzz, 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 buzz. It wasn't a notification. It was a summons. I looked down at the dark face of the Garmin Tactics on my wrist. The scrolling red text was the only thing in the room that made sense to me. Eagle looking for nest, Code. Red confirmation required. HVT in open. The world slowed down. The noise of the party, the clinking glasses, the jazz band, Chloe's voice hissing in my ear, faded into a dull, underwater hum. My brain shifted gears. It was a physical sensation, like a bolt sliding into a lock. The sister persona, the one who apologized, the one who shrank, the one who ironed napkins, was deactivated. The officer came online. In the Navy, we are trained to compartmentalize. We are trained to push aside fear, pain, and distraction to focus on the mission. And right now, the mission wasn't to clean up champagne glasses. The mission was standing 10 yards away, wearing 4 stars, waiting for my intel. "Demi!" Chloe snapped, realizing I hadn't moved. "Did you hear me? I said move. The kitchen is that way." She pointed a manicured finger toward the swinging service doors, the gateway to the back of the house where the help belonged. I looked at the doors, then I looked at the tray in my hands. It was heavy, slick with condensation and spilled alcohol. It was a symbol of everything they thought I was. Disposable, dirty, beneath them. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs not with the stale air of the ballroom, but with the cold, steel resolve of command. "No," I said. It was a whisper, but it felt like a shout. I turned away from the kitchen. I took 2 steps toward a high-top cocktail table that was covered in a pristine white cloth. "What are you doing?" Chloe demanded, stepping after me. "Don't you dare put that down here." I lifted the heavy tray. I didn't set it down gently. I didn't look for a coaster. Clang. I dropped the metal tray onto the table with deliberate, jarring force. The sound was violent. It cut through the polite chatter of the nearby guests like a gunshot. Dirty silverware rattled. A champagne glass tipped over, spilling amber liquid onto the white cloth. Heads turned. Mrs. Vanderhoven gasped. My mother stopped mid-sip, her eyes widening in horror. "Demi!" my mother hissed. "Have you lost your mind?" I didn't look at her. I looked down at my waist. I reached behind my back and found the knot of the ridiculous floral apron Chloe had forced me to wear. I pulled the string. The knot came undone. I pulled the apron off my body. It felt like shedding a skin. It felt like taking off a straitjacket. I balled the fabric up in my fist, this symbol of my domestic servitude, of my place in this family. I tossed the crumpled ball of fabric onto the tray of dirty dishes. It landed right on top of the reject blush pink napkins. Trash with trash. "I am done," I said. My voice was no longer the raspy, apologetic mumble of the family failure. It was the voice that gave orders to aircraft carriers. It was a voice that projected from the diaphragm, steady and lethal. "Done with what?" Chloe sputtered, her face flushing red. "You are ruining the ambiance. Pick that up." I ignored her. I placed my hands on my hips for a split second, rolling my shoulders back. I felt my spine straighten, stacking vertebra by vertebra until I was standing at my full height. I lifted my chin. I fixed my hair, smoothing back a stray strand that had escaped during the ironing session. I wasn't wearing a uniform. I was wearing a cheap, baggy, dusty rose polyester dress. But in that moment, it didn't matter. I wore my authority like armor. I turned to face them. My mother looked confused, like she was looking at a stranger. Chloe looked furious, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. The same uncertainty a bully feels when the victim suddenly stops crying and starts smiling. "I'm not going to the kitchen, Chloe," I said, my eyes locking onto hers. "I have work to do." "Work?" Chloe laughed, a high-pitched, nervous sound. "What work? Fixing the DJ's laptop?" "No," I said. "Real work." I pivoted on my heel, a precise military movement. I looked across the room. General Sterling was still standing there, looking at his phone, his brow furrowed. He was the objective. I began to walk. I didn't scurry. I didn't shuffle. I walked with the long, purposeful stride of an officer inspecting the deck. I cut a path through the crowd. People instinctively moved out of my way, not because I pushed them, but because my energy had shifted. I was no longer a background character. I was the protagonist. "Demi, come back here," Chloe shouted after me, her voice cracking. "I am the bride," You do what I say. Her voice sounded small. It sounded distant. It sounded like a mosquito buzzing against a window pane. I didn't turn around. I kept my eyes fixed on the general. I was walking into the center of the room, into the brightest pool of light from the chandelier. I was walking into the kill zone, but this time, I wasn't the target. I was the weapon. As I approached, I saw Major Vance, the aide I'd spotted earlier. He straightened up as he saw me coming. He didn't look at me with pity. He looked at me with recognition. He gave me a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. Validation. It fueled me. I was 10 feet away from the general, 5 feet. He looked up from his phone. He saw me. He didn't see the dress. He didn't see the mess. He saw his lieutenant colonel. He saw the eagle's nest. I stopped right in front of him, invading the personal space that Chloe had been trying so hard to monopolize. The chatter in the room died down. Everyone was watching the crazy sister who had just thrown a tray of dishes approach the 4-star general. I took a breath, and I prepared to drop the mask forever. The distance between the service station and the center of the ballroom was less than 50 feet, but it felt like walking across a minefield. Every step I took was a declaration of war. Demi, stop! Chloe's voice was tearing through the air, high and frantic. She wasn't just angry anymore, she was panicked. She scrambled after me, her heavy Vera Wang gown rustling loudly like dry leaves. She grabbed my arm again, digging her nails in deep, trying to physically drag me back into the shadows. Get off me, I said. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. I shook her off with a practiced, sharp movement I had learned in basic training, a simple break of the grip that sent her stumbling back a step in her heels. The guests gasped. The music stopped. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. You are insane, Chloe shrieked, regaining her balance. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure ugliness. You are trying to ruin my wedding because you are miserable. You are a jealous, pathetic little spinster. Look at you. You're wearing a dress I bought for you, eating food Dad paid for, and you have the audacity to make a scene. She stepped in front of me, blocking my path to the general. She spread her arms wide, shielding him from me as if I were a contagious disease. Security! She yelled, looking around wildly. Somebody get security. Get this trash out of here. General Sterling, who had been looking at his phone, slowly lifted his head. He turned. He saw Chloe screaming. He saw me standing there, chin up, shoulders back, staring her down. And then, he saw the face of his intelligence officer. The transformation in the general's demeanor was instantaneous. The polite, bored guest vanished. The commander of the Indo-Pacific Command appeared. His eyes narrowed. He looked at Chloe, who was currently hyperventilating and pointing a finger at my face. Get out! Chloe screamed at me one last time. General Sterling stepped forward. He didn't ask what was happening. He didn't ask for clarification. He simply reached out and, with a firm, dismissive sweep of his arm, brushed Chloe aside. It wasn't violent, but it was absolute. It was the way you brush away a cobweb. Excuse me, ma'am, he rumbled. His voice was deep, gravelly, and carried enough authority to crack the foundation of the hotel. Chloe stumbled back, shocked that her trophy guest had just touched her with anything other than admiration. General? I'm just trying to protect you from... You are blocking my path, he said coldly. He didn't even look at her. His eyes were locked on me. The room held its breath. 200 people watched in confusion. Why was the 4-star general walking toward the sister who fixed printers? Why was he looking at the black sheep with that intensity? The general took 3 long, purposeful strides. The sound of his military dress shoes striking the marble floor echoed through the silence. Clack, clack, clack. He stopped exactly 2 feet in front of me. I didn't flinch. I didn't look down. I looked him dead in the eye. And then, the impossible happened. General Marcus Sterling, a man who had advised 3 presidents, a man whose chest was heavy with medals of valor, snapped his heels together. The sound was sharp, like a pistol crack. He straightened his back. He raised his right hand in a crisp, slow, perfect arc. His fingers were straight, his thumb tucked, his hand angled perfectly at his brow. He saluted me. It wasn't a casual wave. It wasn't a greeting. It was a formal military salute, rendered with the utmost respect from a superior officer to a valued subordinate. The silence in the room shattered. You could practically hear the collective brain of the Loudoun County elite short-circuiting. "Lieutenant Colonel Morris," the general boomed. His voice wasn't a whisper. He wanted the people in the back row to hear. He wanted the waiters to hear. He wanted the world to hear. "My apologies for the delay, Colonel. The secure line was compromised by the local jamming." He glanced disdainfully at the crowd, implying their cell phones were the issue. "The White House Situation Room is on standby. The President is waiting for your assessment of the vector change in the South China Sea." Time seemed to freeze. I held the salute for a heartbeat, letting the image burn into the retinas of everyone present. Then, I cut a sharp salute back. "Ready to brief, General," I said, my voice steady and clear. "At ease," he said, dropping his hand. I dropped mine. And then came the sound. Crash! To my left, my mother, Janet, had been holding a crystal flute of vintage champagne. Her hand had gone completely numb. The glass slipped from her fingers, hit the marble floor, and exploded. Champagne and shards of crystal sprayed over her expensive shoes, but she didn't move. She couldn't move. Her mouth was hanging open, her eyes wide and vacant, staring at me as if I had just grown a second head. Next to her, my father, Robert, the man who loved to talk about stocks and return on investment, dropped his Cuban cigar. It landed on the lapel of his $3,000 suit, burning a slow black hole into the fabric. He didn't notice. He was staring at the 4 stars on the general's shoulder and then at the face of the daughter he had refused to co-sign a loan for. But the reaction I savored the most was Chloe's. My sister was standing 5 feet away. She looked like she had been slapped by an invisible hand. Her face, usually flushed with anger or alcohol, had drained of all color. She was ghostly white. Her lips were moving, trying to form words, but no sound was coming out. "Lieutenant... Colonel?" she finally whispered, the words choking her. But you fix printers. You work in IT." General Sterling turned his head slowly to look at her. His expression was one of withering pity. "Fix printers?" The general let out a short, derisive scoff. "Young lady, your sister coordinates the cyber defense grid for the entire 7th Fleet. She has a higher security clearance than most senators. If she decides to fix a printer, it's probably because that printer contains secrets that keep this country from burning down." He turned back to me, dismissing her completely. "We need a secure room, Colonel. Now." "My father's study in the library wing is empty," I said, ignoring my father's gasping fish impression. "It should be quiet." "Lead the way," the general said. I turned my back on them. I turned my back on the broken glass, the burning suit, and the shattered ego of the bride. As I walked away, flanked by the general and Major Vance, I heard a sound from the crowd. It started as a murmur, then grew. It was the sound of admiration. It was the sound of respect. "Did you know?" someone whispered. "A lieutenant colonel? Her? My God, 4 stars." I walked past Mark, the groom. He was clutching his chest, looking like he was about to have a cardiac event. I didn't stop. I didn't gloat. I didn't say, "I told you so." I didn't have to. The general had said it all for me. As we reached the double doors of the library, I paused for just a second. I glanced back over my shoulder. Chloe was still standing there, frozen in the wreckage of her perfect aesthetic. The blush pink napkins were on the floor. The dirty tray was on the table. And her little sister, the failure, the disappointment, the oak tree among the roses, was walking out the door to take a call from the president. I pushed the doors open. "Let's get to work, General," I said. The heavy oak doors of the library swung open, and the silence that greeted us was heavier than the one we had left behind. 10 minutes. That was all it had taken. 10 minutes to brief the National Security Council, confirm the de-escalation protocols with the 7th Fleet, and prevent a geopolitical crisis in the South China Sea. General Sterling walked beside me, his demeanor relaxed now that the job was done. Major Vance trailed a step behind, securing the communications gear. We walked back into the ballroom, not as guests, but as a separate entity, a unit of 3, isolated by competence in a room full of people whose biggest worry was the open bar tab. The atmosphere in the Ritz-Carlton had shifted on its axis. The band had stopped playing. The guests were standing in clumps, whispering, their eyes darting toward us. The air smelled of expensive perfume and nervous sweat. I looked for Chloe. She was sitting on a velvet ottoman near the dance floor, her massive dress pooling around her like a deflated parachute. She wasn't crying anymore. She was just staring at the floor, picking at a loose thread on her bodice. The bridezilla who had commanded the room an hour ago had evaporated. But as we stepped fully into the light, I saw movement. It was my father. Robert Morris, the man who had looked at me with glazed-over eyes during dinner just 48 hours ago, was buttoning his suit jacket. He smoothed his silver hair. He put on a smile that I recognized instantly. It was his closing the deal smile. It was the smile he wore when he was about to charm a client he secretly despised. He strode toward us, arms wide open, his voice booming loud enough to reach the back of the room. He wasn't talking to me. He was performing for the audience. "There she is," he shouted, laughing a deep, hearty, fake laugh. "There is my girl, the woman of the hour." He walked right up to me, ignoring the general's steely gaze, and attempted to wrap his heavy arm around my shoulders. He wanted the visual. He wanted the guests to see him embracing the lieutenant colonel. He wanted to claim my success as his own. "My God, Demetria," he said, leaning in, his breath smelling of stale cigars and desperation. "Why are you so secretive, honey? Why didn't you tell your old man you were running the whole Navy? I mean, a lieutenant colonel? I had no idea. I am so proud of you." He squeezed my shoulder, turning us slightly so we faced the photographer. "Get a picture of this. Proud papa right here." The flash of the camera went off. It blinded me for a second, and in that second, something inside me finally died. It wasn't my love for him that had withered years ago. It was my hope. The tiny, foolish hope that he might one day love me just for being Demi. He didn't love me. He loved the proximity to power. He loved that General Sterling, a 4-star legend, was standing next to me. I was no longer the IT support failure. I was now a valuable asset in his portfolio. I didn't shout. I didn't cause a scene. I simply lifted my left hand and took hold of his wrist. I removed his arm from my shoulder. I did it slowly, deliberately, like I was removing a piece of lint. I stepped back, creating a physical gap between us. A gap that was only 2 feet wide, but emotionally was an ocean. The smile on my father's face faltered. His arm hung in the air, rejected. "Dad," I said. My voice was soft, but in the silent room, it carried like a bell. "Now, honey, don't be like that," he chuckled nervously, glancing around at the watching guests. "It's a celebration. We just had a little misunderstanding, that's all. We didn't know." "You didn't know," I repeated. I looked him in the eye. "Dad, I tried to tell you. I tried to tell you on Tuesday night when I came home. I tried to tell you at dinner while you were talking about your energy stocks. I tried to tell you in the kitchen when Chloe told me I was an embarrassment." "We were busy, Demi," he said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper, his smile tightening. "Don't do this here." "You weren't busy," I said, shaking my head. "You were indifferent. You didn't hear me because you didn't think I had anything worth saying. You only listen when the person speaking can offer you something. And now that you think I have power, suddenly you have ears." I took another step back. "But it's too late, Robert. You don't get to claim the victory if you weren't there for the battle. And you certainly don't get to claim the soldier if you refuse to sign the loan that bought her boots." My father's face turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. He opened his mouth to argue, to gaslight, to spin the narrative, but he couldn't. Because standing right behind me, silent and imposing as a mountain, was General Sterling. My father looked at the general, then looked down at his shoes. He retreated. He actually took a step back, defeated by the truth. I turned away from him. I felt light. The weight of their approval, which I had been carrying for 32 years, had just dropped off my shoulders. "General," I said. I'm ready to leave. One moment, Colonel, General Sterling said. He walked past me. He walked past my father. He walked toward the groom. Mark was standing near the cake table, looking like a man who had bet his life savings on the wrong horse. He was pale. He was sweating. He looked from Chloe, who was still slumped on the ottoman, to me, and then to the general. General Sterling stopped in front of him. He didn't salute. He didn't offer a handshake. He leaned in close, invading Mark's personal space just enough to be uncomfortable. I couldn't hear everything he said, but I heard the important part. The part that was meant to be a final act of mercy for a civilian caught in the crossfire. You are marrying into a dangerous family, son, the general rumbled, his voice low and grave. And I don't mean dangerous like the enemies we fight. I mean dangerous to the soul. Mark swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. A woman who cannot recognize the value of her own sister, the general continued, glancing briefly at Chloe, will never be able to recognize your value either. She measures worth in fabric swatches and price tags. You need to ask yourself if you can afford that kind of marriage, because from where I'm standing, the price is too high. The general patted Mark on the shoulder, two heavy taps that felt more like a condolences than a congratulation. Think about it, Sterling said. He turned back to me. Let's go, Demi. The car is waiting. He used my first name, not Colonel. Demi. It was the first time all weekend that someone had said my name with gentleness. I looked at the room one last time. I saw the ruins of the reception. I saw the blush pink napkins on the floor. I saw my mother crying silently, not for me, but for the social disaster. I saw my sister, the rose, wilting under the heat of reality. And I realized I didn't hate them. I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt done. I turned my back on the chandeliers and the champagne. I followed the general toward the exit, toward the cool night air, leaving the toxicity sealed inside the ballroom like a tomb. The air outside the Ritz-Carlton tasted different than the air inside. Inside, it was recycled, perfumed, and heavy with the weight of expectation. Outside, under the Virginia night sky, it tasted like freedom. I walked out of the revolving doors, the hum of the hotel fading behind me. General Sterling and Major Vance were a few steps ahead, flanked by two security detail officers who had materialized from the shadows, my stride hitching. The hem of the oversized dusty rose bridesmaid dress kept catching under the heel of my stilettos. It was a final, petty attempt by the dress to hold me back, to trip me up, to keep me small. I stopped in the middle of the circular driveway. 1 second, General, I said. I didn't wait for permission. I reached down, grabbing the cheap polyester fabric just above my knee. I didn't care that it was a rental. I didn't care that my father had paid for it. I gripped it with both hands and pulled. Repeat. The sound was loud, satisfying, and final. A 2-foot strip of ruffles and tulle tore away in my hands. I balled it up and tossed it into a concrete planter next to a manicured boxwood hedge. Much better, I exhaled. I walked the rest of the way to the curb without stumbling. Waiting for us was a line of 3 black Chevrolet Suburbans with tinted windows and U.S. government plates. The engines were idling, a low, powerful rumble that felt like a lullaby to my ears. Major Vance opened the rear door of the middle vehicle for me. After you, Colonel, he said. I slid into the back seat. The leather was cool and smelled of nothing. No flowers, no cologne. Just clean, sterile, professional silence. General Sterling got into the front passenger seat. The heavy door slammed shut with a solid thud, sealing us inside a capsule of safety. To the airfield, sir, the driver asked. Take us to Andrews, the general replied. We have a briefing at 0600. As the SUV pulled away, leaving the glittering facade of the Ritz-Carlton in the rearview mirror, I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding since I was 10 years old. My body sank into the seat. I looked down at my feet. My toes were screaming in the cheap, strappy heels Chloe had insisted all the bridesmaids wear. They were pinching, blistering, forcing my feet into a shape they weren't meant to hold. I leaned down and unbuckled the straps. I kicked the heels off. They clattered onto the floor mat. From my tactical backpack, which Major Vance had retrieved from the hotel concierge, I pulled out the only pair of shoes that had ever felt like home: my combat boots. They were scuffed at the toes. The laces were fraying slightly at the ends. They had sand in the treads from 3 different deserts. They were ugly, heavy, and absolutely beautiful. I slipped my feet into them. I laced them up tight, pulling the knots secure. The familiarity of the pressure around my ankles grounded me. This was who I was. I wasn't a bridesmaid. I wasn't a disappointment. I was a soldier. I looked out the window as the Virginia suburbs blurred past, the strip malls, the townhouses, the life I was supposed to want but never fit into. "You okay back there, Demi?" General Sterling asked, watching me in the rearview mirror. "I am now, sir," I said. And for the first time in a long time, I meant it. 3 months later, the view from my new office at the Pentagon was spectacular. From the E-Ring, I could look out over the Potomac River and see the monuments of Washington, D.C. rising in the distance. The nameplate on my desk had been updated. It no longer read Lieutenant Colonel. It read Colonel Demetria Morris. The promotion had come through 2 weeks after the incident in the South China Sea. My analysis had been correct. The de-escalation strategy I proposed had worked. The Navy had saved billions of dollars and, more importantly, countless lives. I was currently reviewing a budget proposal for a new cybersecurity initiative when my personal phone buzzed on the desk. I rarely checked it during duty hours, but the pattern was persistent. Buzz, buzz, buzz. I picked it up. It was a text message. The name on the screen made my stomach tighten for a fraction of a second. A phantom limb pain from an amputated relationship. Chloe. I hadn't spoken to her since I walked out of the library. I hadn't spoken to my parents either. I had gone no contact. I blocked their emails. I filtered their calls. I ghosted them, not out of malice, but out of necessity. I unlocked the phone and read the message. "Hey sis, long time no talk. Mom told me you got promoted to colonel. That is crazy, LOL. Who knew? Anyway, I miss you. We should grab lunch soon. Mark and I are in DC next week. Also, super random, but things are a little tight with the house payments right now. Mark's dad is being a jerk about the trust fund. Do you think you could spot us a loan? Just until the holidays. Love you. XOXO. I stared at the screen. 3 months. No apology. No. I'm sorry I treated you like garbage. No, I'm sorry I tried to ruin your career. Just, that is crazy, LOL. As if my promotion was a fluke. As if my hard work was a joke. And then, the hook. Things are a little tight. It was a masterclass in manipulation. The flattery, the guilt trip, the request for money, all wrapped up in a fake, love you. In the past, I would have replied. I would have sent the money. I would have tried to buy my way back into her good graces, hoping that this time she would finally respect me. But I looked down at my boots under the desk. I looked at the colonel's eagle pinned to my collar. I thought about the team of analysts waiting for me in the briefing room. Men and women who listened when I spoke, who trusted my judgment, who had my back without asking for a dime. That was my family. Family isn't about whose blood runs in your veins. It's not about who you share a last name with. Family are the people who respect your existence. Family are the people who cheer for you when you win, not the ones who ask for a loan when they lose. Family are the people who stand beside you in the trenches, not the ones who push you into the line of fire to save themselves. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I felt nothing. It was the beautiful, peaceful silence of a closed door. My thumb hovered over the reply button. Then, I moved it to the top right corner. Block caller. Delete conversation. I pressed the button. The message vanished. The link was severed. I placed the phone face down on the desk. I stood up, straightened my uniform, and grabbed my briefing binder. Colonel Morris, a young lieutenant, poked his head into my office. The Joint Chiefs are ready for you. I'm coming, I said. I walked out of the office, leaving the phone, the text, and the Morris family behind me. I walked toward the briefing room, my boots striking the floor with a steady, rhythmic beat. I was a wolf who had finally left the toxic pack. And out here, in the wild, I was doing just fine. If you've ever had to walk away from family to save your own soul, I want you to comment freedom below. Don't let anyone tell you that you have to set yourself on fire just to keep others warm. Subscribe for more stories of strength, and remember, the only validation you need is the one you see in the mirror.